Sometimes a joke just doesn't travel well. Comedy that depends on language, accents, and vocal performance always carries risks in international markets, and this film ran straight into that issue. A joke that lands perfectly with domestic audiences can fall completely flat elsewhere. Certain sequences leaned heavily on accents, phrasing, and delivery that didn't translate cleanly across cultural boundaries or expectations. The Colombian drug lord wish sequence, in particular, created complications overseas. Accents meant to function as broad parody came across to some international viewers as awkward or even offensive rather than funny. What played as exaggerated comedy in American theaters felt tone-deaf in regions with different cultural contexts and sensitivities. The effectiveness of the humor ended up depending entirely on where the audience was watching. That uneven reception adds an unexpected layer to repeat viewings. Once you know certain gags were designed with specific audiences in mind, they register differently. What initially looks like simple slapstick actually carries cultural assumptions built directly into the performance choices. As a result, the film works differently depending on who's watching and where, which wasn't entirely intentional, but became part of its complicated legacy. The costumes introduced their own set of problems. In most productions, wardrobe supports the story without creating major logistical issues, but this film broke that pattern repeatedly during its shoot. The wish sequences required elaborate outfits that looked impressive on camera while creating genuine challenges during filming. Some costumes were simply too heavy, too restrictive, or too uncomfortable to wear for long stretches without breaks. The basketball player transformation, for example, involved padding that limited mobility and trapped heat under studio lights. Other sequences featured similarly impractical get-ups that worked well in short bursts but became nearly unbearable over time. Costume changes that should have taken only minutes began stretching longer as the shoot progressed, and physical fatigue built up among the cast. These limitations directly influenced how scenes were filmed and structured. During costume-heavy sequences, directors had to move quickly, capturing usable footage before discomfort started affecting performance quality. Scene lengths were carefully calibrated around what the wardrobe physically allowed actors to endure. None of these constraints are visible to audiences, but they quietly shaped the pacing and structure of multiple sequences throughout the production. The beach scene is another example of how deceptively simple moments can hide enormous effort. Outdoor filming introduces variables that controlled studio environments avoid entirely. Weather, natural light, and environmental conditions can change without warning, turning straightforward scenes into logistical headaches. In the finished film, the beach sequence looks calm and effortless, but getting there required sustained work from the entire crew. Cloud cover shifted throughout the day, forcing constant lighting adjustments to maintain visual consistency between shots. Wind interfered with sound recording and created continuity issues with hair and wardrobe. Tides altered the shoreline between takes, demanding careful attention to background details that most viewers would never consciously notice. Ironically, everything that makes beaches visually appealing also makes them extremely difficult to film. The final cut hides all of this effort completely. Audiences see a smooth, pleasant sequence that feels natural and unforced. Behind that illusion are hours of repeated adjustments, patient waiting for the right conditions, and careful editing designed to smooth over inconsistencies. It's a reminder that the simplest-looking footage often requires the most complicated work behind the scenes. Like most films, Bedazzled wasn't shot in the order audiences see on screen. Practical considerations almost always outweigh narrative logic when schedules are built, and this production leaned heavily into that reality. The wish-based structure made shooting in story order nearly impossible without wasting enormous amounts of time and resources on repeated setups. Makeup and costume demands dictated many scheduling decisions. By grouping scenes based on transformation requirements, actors could stay in a single look for longer stretches, significantly reducing turnaround time. Energy management also factored in. Physically demanding sequences were spaced out to prevent exhaustion from undermining performance quality. Efficiency consistently took priority over storytelling order during production. Careful planning ensured that this fragmented approach didn't result in continuity disasters. Script supervisors tracked details obsessively, from wardrobe placement to emotional beats that needed to align across scenes filmed weeks apart. In the editing room, These scattered pieces were assembled into a coherent narrative. What feels like a smooth progression through Elliot's wishes is actually the result of dozens of out-of-sequence shooting days stitched together with precision. Some of the devil's most effective traits weren't written into the script at all. While script pages can outline dialogue and action, they rarely capture the subtle physical choices that truly define a character. Much of the devil's presence in this film comes from body language that developed during production rather than existing on the page beforehand. Small gestures and movement choices became essential tools for establishing dominance without relying on words. Elizabeth Hurley developed a set of specific physical signatures for the role. Deliberate stillness, paired with sudden, precise movements, created an unsettling sense of control. The character rarely rushes, rarely fidgets, and almost never shows uncertainty through posture or gesture. Those choices communicate superiority more effectively than overt threats ever could. This physical vocabulary carries through every scene the devil appears in. Even when delivering comedic lines, the underlying body language maintains a quiet edge of menace beneath the charm. Audiences register this on a subconscious level, sensing the power imbalance between characters without necessarily knowing why. The performance operates on multiple layers at once, blending humor with something slightly unsettling beneath the playful surface. A surprising amount of the comedy was also shaped after filming wrapped. Timing is what separates good comedy from great comedy, and that timing often gets refined long after the cameras stop rolling. Many of the film's biggest laughs were discovered in the editing room rather than on set. The raw footage captured the performances, but the precise rhythm that makes jokes land was built during post-production. Editors controlled everything from the length of pauses before punchlines to the duration of reaction shots and the exact moment to cut away from a gag. Those choices transformed material that was merely adequate into sequences that were genuinely funny. Jokes that felt flat during filming suddenly worked once surrounding footage was trimmed and repositioned. In effect, the editorial team rewrote the comedy using timing alone. That process helps explain why the film's humor feels so controlled despite its chaotic premise. Every beat was tested and calibrated, with alternate takes and timing variations explored extensively before final decisions were locked. The rapid-fire pacing audiences experience represents countless hours of refinement. What looks spontaneous and effortless is actually the result of meticulous craftsmanship applied frame by frame throughout a long post-production process. Finally, test screenings led to one of the film's most significant late-stage changes. These screenings exist to identify problems before wide release, and this production used that feedback to make a major structural adjustment. Early versions of the film included a rockstar wish sequence that didn't perform well with preview audiences. Feedback suggested that the segment disrupted pacing and failed to deliver a consistent comedic payoff. As a result, the decision was made to remove it entirely. In its place, the filmmakers introduced the Abraham Lincoln wish, which offered stronger comedic opportunities and cleaner thematic connections to Elliot's journey. Making that swap required additional shooting and editing, but the improvement justified the extra time and expense. The change noticeably strengthened the final film. The Lincoln sequence fit more naturally into the overall structure and delivered clearer commentary on Elliot's flawed ideas about greatness. Test audiences responded more positively in subsequent screenings after the change was implemented. It's a clear example of how audience feedback can meaningfully improve a film when filmmakers are willing to make difficult adjustments late in the process.